You know what I've seen too many times? Procurement teams working their guts out to negotiate great deals and then watching those savings evaporate because finance wasn't in the loop. And on the flip side, finance running the numbers on cost savings targets with zero visibility into what's actually happening with suppliers, contracts, and spend. The result? Lost value, duplicated effort, and a whole lot of frustration. But when FP&A and procurement work together, that's when things start to click. So in this video, I'm breaking down the procurement cycle and showing exactly where finance can step in to help procurement unlock serious business value. Let's dive in. It always starts with someone needing something. Maybe it's laptops, maybe it's custom components for manufacturing. Maybe it's cloud hosting capacity that spikes in Q4. Here's where FP&A can immediately add value. Ask why now. Not to block the request, but to align it with timing, forecast, budgets, and cash. A small shift in timing can have a huge impact in cost. Quick story. One team I've worked with deferred a hardware order by 6 weeks simply because finance saw that prices were due to drop post-quarter. We saved over $400,000 on timing alone. That's the power of aligned demand planning. Next, sourcing. Procurement's job is to find suppliers. FP&A's job is to bring context. What's the cost trend on those materials? How do price moves hit our margin? What would a 10% shift in input costs do to our forecast? Finance makes sure the sourcing strategy is grounded in more than price. It's based on long-term business impact. In one project, FP&A flagged that a preferred supplier's pricing was pegged to a currency we had exposure to, and that exposure had moved 6% since the last quote. That insight led to a hedging strategy before the contract was signed. That's risk-managed sourcing. Now, negotiation. Here's where procurement shines, but too often they're negotiating in the dark. When FP&A steps in with financial modeling, everything changes. You can show trade-offs where the working capital impact if we offer 60-day terms, for example. How does a volume commitment affect our margin profile? Can we tie rebates to KPIs and forecast the upside? One deal we shaped offered a supplier 45-day payment terms instead of 30, in exchange for a 3% annual rebate linked to the volume thresholds. Procurement loved it. Finance made sure it worked. The business kept in cash longer and saved money. That's partnership. This is where FP&A must be at the table. Contract clauses aren't just legal, they're financial instruments. Escalation clauses, inflation triggers, volume minimums, they all affect your bottom line. I've seen contracts where 5% inflation clause kicked in automatically, and the budget assumed flat pricing. So guess what happened? Variance, margin loss, finger pointing. When finance co-reviews the contract, we can simulate scenarios and protect the P&L before the ink is dry. For example, a contract we reviewed had a tiered pricing clause. If you purchase at least 1,000 units, the unit cost is $2. If you purchase fewer, unit cost jumps to 2.2. We flagged that in advance, modeled it, and warned that ordering less would actually increase total cost. Purchase orders and monitoring. POs get created, spend goes out. Here's where FP&A becomes the radar. We monitor spend versus plan. Spot anomalies early. We create automated alerts when PO levels exceed forecasted ranges. In one case, we caught a PO that was 30% above the specified and flagged it before the invoice even hit the system. Procurement appreciated and finance avoided a surprise. That's visibility. But there's more. Sometimes the total PO doesn't tell the full story. You could see a higher total and think price went up, and actually the mix changed or the contract tiers weren't met. So let me show you how we break that down with a PVM, price volume mix analysis. Let's see here a typical forecast versus actual analysis where we are going to compare wherever we forecasted at the contract to whatever came in the PO. I'm going to add two columns here on the forecast and on the actuals because I want to see the mix of those units towards the total. So I'm just going to add some calculation here to calculate how much I was expecting to buy from each one of those materials and then how much I did buy from each one of those materials. And that's because the mix can be a great part of the variance as well, and not only price and units. Next, let's calculate the impact of each one of those items, the volume, the price, and the mix. So we're going to start with the volume. So to do that, I'm going to get the total that I had in the actuals, and I'm going to multiply that by the mix that I had in the forecast. That's going to give me a hypothetical amount for each material based on the total units, the new total units, because that's what I'm isolating now, is the total volume. So I'm going to multiply now these total units by the price in the forecast. Let me just format here, and when I do this, I am assuming that this new unit totals is going to be isolated because I'm still using the prices in the forecast. Now, to get the effect of these isolated units that were higher, I'm going to compare this new total with the forecast total. So now, instead of comparing to the total actuals, I'm just comparing the total units that went higher. Everything else is equal to the forecast. Now I'm going to stack the impact of mix. So to do that, the units, I'm going to get the difference between this total that I created and the actuals. So I'm just going to subtract the total in the actuals to this total that I created. So this difference is going to be isolating the impact of the mix. And I'm going to multiply the impact of the mix by the price in the forecast because I don't want any impact of the prices yet. So once I do that, now let me just format everything so it will look good. And now I can create the last piece, which is the impact of prices. I'm going to do the difference between the price in the actual to the price in the forecast, and I will multiply that by the units in the actual. So that way I'm stacking the impact of each one on top of the other. I start with the volume, then I stack the mix, and then I stack the price. Now I have calculated the impact by material. I can start to aggregate that into a table so we can check and do some charts on it. So let me start with the forecast, then each one of the impacts, volume, mix, price, and then we arrive at the actual or whatever we have in the PO. So I'm creating now some formulas to aggregate that by category, and I'm going to use a sum ifs formula, which is easy for me just to copy and paste and move over. So just copying everything and moving the arrays. Make sure I lock everything in place so it doesn't move with the formula, so I can just pull the arrays and it's much easier, much faster for me to create all those formulas. Moving that to the mix, this one to the price, and this one to the actuals. Now that I have all of them, I can pull down and creating the totals. Let me format, and now this is ready for my charts. I'm going to choose the lines. Let me choose separately, insert a chart here, and let me transform this into totals and put the name of the chart right here so I can create the same for the next one. Set as total, set as total. Those are the boats.
Let me just make them small so we'll fit the third one here. Set as total, set as total. This one is the fasteners. Okay, so I have my 3 charts. Let me make a total one so we can actually see the total impact of each one of those items in my variance. So let's call it total variance. Take the grid lines and the axes. So this is the PVM analysis. That's a way to know what the price, volume, and mix impact in the variance between whatever we had in the forecast to whatever we have in the actuals, or whatever we had in the contract to what we have in the actual PO.
Invoice and payment timing. You think this part is just admin. It's not. Working capital lives here. Should we pay early for a 2% discount? Should we hold payment to conserve cash during a tight month? FP&A helps model this out. One quarter, we staggered payments across non-critical suppliers, freeing up $6 million in working capital during a tight month. And no suppliers were upset because we communicated. Procurement handled the relationships and finance handled the math. Everyone won. Supplier performance review. Here's the piece most companies skip. Procurement closes the loop. Finance connects it to value. Savings realized versus forecast. Delivery versus SLA. Cost per unit versus budget. Penalty clauses triggered or not. I've seen suppliers who looked great on paper until FP&A showed the hidden costs. Freight overages, missed deadlines, support overruns. That data changed the next negotiation and saved millions. The big picture. Every step of the procurement cycle is a chance to add value, but only if finance and procurement work as a unit. Finance brings visibility, modeling, scenario thinking, cash strategy, and risk awareness. Procurement brings market knowledge, negotiation, supplier intelligence, and execution. Put them together and you don't just save money, you shape smarter decisions, you protect margins, and you speed up time to value. So the next time someone says procurement's job is to get the best price, you can say it's our job to drive business value together. If this helped you rethink how finance can partner with procurement, I'd love to hear how you're doing it. Drop a comment or share how your team's using those tools. I hope you liked this content, and if you do, please hit the like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next ones. I'll see you in the next one.